My parents sheltered my violent brother, so I left, erased myself, and rose again, until the only way they could see me was on national TV. As a 26-year-old woman, the easy label is the one I've worn like a second skin throughout my life. It seems innocuous, perhaps even flattering. Easy, however, was code for invisible in my household. That meant I didn't cause any commotion. When things weren't fair, I didn't yell. When I was hurt, I didn't snap. I was supposed to be quiet, low maintenance, and always forgiving. Adrian, my older brother, was the exact opposite. Charm wrapped in confusion was who he was. One day, he would punch a hole in the wall, and the next, he would use tactful conversation to get out of it. Despite his mental and physical cruelty, my parents always found a way to justify it. They'd say, "He's going through a phase. Boys will be boys," or my favorite, "He's got a lot of emotions and doesn't know how to express them." It seems that I was too good at expressing my own feelings by refraining from doing so. I was instructed to share if Adrian damaged anything of mine. I had to be careful with my tone if he yelled at me. They got him a tutor if he didn't pass a class. Just a nod when I aced my. No hugs or compliments, just the expectation that I would continue to deliver in silence. It was their motto, yelled at me each time Adrian lost control, and I can't even begin to count the number of times I heard it. Be the bigger person. I began to think that perhaps I was meant to suffer in quiet every time I sobbed and defended myself. Perhaps it was love, sucking your suffering to keep the peace. However, there was always a murmur in the back of my mind that said, "This isn't right." Eventually, that whisper would grow into a scream. Not yet though. Not before the situation worsened. Much worse. I was 12 when Adrian physically harmed me for the first time. We were fighting over the TV remote, something regular, something stupid, and he was 15. He didn't simply shove me though. Grabbing me by the hair, he violently jerked me from the couch till my head struck the floor. I recall the ringing in my ears, the jolt, and the dull thud. My mother groaned and replied, "Don't antagonize him, sweetheart. You know how he gets." That became the template when I raced to her in tears, gripping the back of my skull. I discovered early on that suffering brought on by Adrian was not considered. The abuse had changed by the time I was in high school. It was psychological warfare, not merely scratches or bruises. At the dinner table, Dad would read through my diary and make fun of my fears aloud. He once took my phone and pretended to be me in order to send nasty messages to my pals. Because of that, I lost friendships. I once attempted to confront him. He slammed me so forcefully into a closet door that it broke. "Finally, they'll see it. Finally, they'll believe me," was my initial thinking when my parents rushed in, but Adrian broke down in tears. He made up some lurid tale about how I had attacked him first, that he was only protecting himself, and that he had no intention of hurting me. He was held by my mother. My father regarded me as though I were the issue. I had a big knot in my stomach and an ice pack on my shoulder when I went to bed that night. Not only was I being harmed by my brother, but my parents were also constantly giving him the knife and urging me to stop bleeding. I started to question what would occur if he ever went too far, and even worse, what would they do in that case? The night Adrian stabbed me in the throat, I was 18. In my memory, it still feels weird to state it so directly, like if I'm exaggerating or making things too dramatic. However, I didn't. I was unable to. It was real, frightening, icy, and sharp. As usual, it began with something trivial. I confronted him after he took $25 out of my wallet. I didn't even shout. I simply entered the kitchen and commanded, "Give it back." He chuckled, the arrogant, self-satisfied laugh he always had when he knew no one would hold him responsible. He grinned at me as if he wanted me to swing first and asked, "What? $25? Knowing where this was going, I turned to go, but he grabbed my wrist and threw me against the refrigerator. The handle bounced off my skull. Before I yelled, I can still taste the metallic flavor in my tongue. Then he reached for the knife. A steak knife. Just. It doesn't feel little though, when someone who is trembling with anger presses it under your jawline. It seems definitive. He had wild eyes. The scent of Monster energy drinks and marijuana filled his breath. I had the fleeting idea. This is it. My neighbors must have heard my scream since the police arrived before my parents had even arrived home. Handcuffed on our front lawn in full view of the neighborhood, Adrian was taken into custody. Wrapped in a blanket, I sat on the porch with my hands shaking so much that I was unable to grip my phone. Later on, however, the true treachery occurred. That evening, my folks gave him a handout. Mom's irate voice said, "You didn't have to call the police. That was the last straw. There were no embraces or tears. I began packing my bag that evening because I knew I would have to defend myself if no one else would. 4 months after my 19th birthday, I departed on the day my high school graduation cap fell to the ground. No farewell. There was a scrawled letter on the kitchen table that read, "Don't call me, I'm done." There was no family meal. I took a Greyhound bus to a college 3 states away after depleting my cash and packing a duffel bag. I just needed away, and it wasn't even my first choice. Actual, tangible distance. I slept through the first night in my dorm without squirming at every floorboard creak. There was only silence. No shouting, no slamming doors, no knife blocks within reach. And silence was sufficient for a time. I didn't share my story with my lecturers or roommate. I was so good at putting on a front of normalcy that I almost thought I was normal. To make up for what my scholarships didn't pay for, I worked 2 part-time jobs. Weekend barista and library assistant. And I referred to it as progress when I was too tired to cry. Healing wasn't linear, but therapy finally helped. If a bottle of shampoo made me think of home, I would lose it in the shampoo aisle. I still checked my locks twice, sometimes 3 times, before going to bed because I would freak out at loud noises. On special occasions like holidays or birthdays, my parents would occasionally text, "You are missed. Come spend Thanksgiving at home. Adrian is now doing well." I never answered. I owed them no closure. They referred to it as doing better, but I dubbed it forgetting. They desired to erase the bloodstains from our family's past and act as though nothing had ever occurred. The sensation of cold steel beneath my jaw, however, was something I would never forget. And when I most needed their voices, I couldn't possibly forget the sound of quiet. I remained absent until they gave me an excuse to speak up, which caused everything to fall apart once more. I gazed at my mom's email for 10 minutes before opening it, and the subject line read, "Adrian wants to reconnect." It was unexpected. My throat was dry and my palms were sweating. I was holding my breath, and I was unaware of it. The email was lengthy and extremely well written, as if she had gone through it 5 times to ensure that the wording was perfect. According to her, Adrian had begun volunteering with a local youth group, found faith, and had been sober for more than a year. She compared him to a character from a Hallmark film who only needed another opportunity. The portion that made me physically ill then came. "He's been invited to return home. We think he's really transformed, and he needs a steady environment. We're hoping that this will be an opportunity for our family to come together and mend. Perhaps you might pay us a visit soon. Don't apologize, no recognition." There was a picture of them cuddling in front of the house, my house, the one I fled like it was on fire, and a smiling face emoji, but not even a half-hearted, "We understand if this is hard for you." My head and body seemed to be separated. My vision became hazy. I read that line again and again. He has evolved. Modified? Did the years of gaslighting end because of the change? Was my traumatized adolescent self gone because of the change? I couldn't sleep that night, so I didn't respond. I kept seeing him dining at my old table, in my old bedroom, and moving through the hallways where I used to hide, cry and bleed. They were changing history in real time by allowing my abuser to return. And I was expected to be thankful somehow. Not all the hurt was reopened by that email. I was informed that the infection had persisted. I have no idea why I did that. Perhaps it was anger. Perhaps it was finally exploding after years of stillness. However, I grabbed the phone and dialed their number. My dad responded after 3 rings, his voice as cheerful as if we were reuniting after a trip. I omitted the small talk and said, "Sweetheart, what a surprise. You're letting Adrian move back in?" A pause occurred. Just long enough to feel practiced, but not too long. I heard my mother's voice, soft, syrupy, cautious, suddenly, so I assumed she had picked up the phone. "Honey, listen. He's really changed. You should see him. He's trying so hard." My fingers hurt from clenching the phone so tightly. He held a knife to my throat. A sigh. A long, dramatic sigh, followed by silence. Her words. "We've all made mistakes. But you can't hold on to the past forever." I was having trouble breathing. "I didn't make a mistake, Mom. I was attacked. I was traumatized. And you, both of you, you let him get away with it, again and again." She broke down, or pretended to. "You don't understand how hard this is on us. Do you think it was easy watching our family fall apart? We're just trying to rebuild." It struck me like a freight train at that moment. This was not an act of forgiveness as they put it. As though the past could be neatly paved over like a cracked road, they were referring to it as reconstruction. I didn't shout. I refrained from crying. I've only stated, if you let him back into that house, you'll never hear from me again. My mother's voice became a whisper. Don't be dramatic. You're better than this. I wasn't better, sorry. I was finished, and my hands were shaking as I hung up. But it wasn't out of terror for the first time in a long time. It came from clarity. I received a direct message on Instagram a week after that call. I felt uneasy because the username was so familiar. Adrian was the one. I went cold. Like a landmine, my thumb lingered over the screen. Despite my warning not to open it, curiosity, or perhaps fear, won out. I gave a tap. It wasn't long. Too brief. He concluded with a cheerful face, as if we were old classmates reuniting after a 10-year break. Hey, no hard feelings. We were just dumb kids. I'm in a better place now. Let's talk sometime. Coffee. As if he hadn't torn me to pieces and abandoned me to put myself back together by myself. For what seemed like hours, I sat on my bed and gazed at that message. It was anger, not melancholy, that made my chest tight. We were simply stupid children. When he threatened me with a knife, he was 18. He was 19 when he shoved me over the remote and shattered my ribs. I wasn't a willing participant in some adolescent sibling rivalry, and he wasn't a kid. I went private, but I didn't reply. He was blocked by me. I removed my LinkedIn profile. I erased all evidence of my residence, place of employment, and place of education. I became acutely aware of how simple it would be for him to locate me if he so desired. However, the message was more than just nerve-wracking, it provided clarification. He was still the same. It was still manipulation and erasure, even though he had recently acquired new skills, softer words and a more composed tone. And perhaps I didn't need to sour relations if my parents were prepared to welcome him back. Perhaps I was done surviving and needed to create a new road, one that they couldn't follow. I was going to get up now. Adrian's message caused a change in me. Not loudly, not right away. I didn't bother tying up the loose thread so it unraveled quietly. I didn't publish a theatrical tirade or yell. I simply deleted myself. Without alerting anyone but my best buddy, I moved out of my shared apartment, changed my phone number, and deleted old email accounts. I even submitted documentation to officially alter a portion of my name. Just enough to make me more difficult to track down, nothing too extreme. I stopped following them on social media. I ceased to envision reconciliation. I gave up expecting excuses that would never come. It was survival, not retaliation. It was referred to as strategic no contact by my therapist. It was the first time I named it breathing. I obtained a new job doing freelance design work for a startup with no corporate ties in a location I had never even been to before. I paid with cash wherever possible, traveled sparingly, and worked remotely. I went into ghost mode in real life, leaving no digital traces behind. And I felt stronger with each stride I walked away from them. There were times when I wondered whether I was being unkind, or if I was becoming into the antagonist in their tale, and I would spend those nights staring at my ceiling. However, I would then recall the knife, the silence, the cold linoleum beneath my back, and the antiseptic odor in the emergency room. Not that I was being mean. For once, I was selecting myself. And I vowed to myself while I sat in a little room above a coffee shop in a city where nobody recognized who I was. I would make sure that the only image of me they would ever see again was on their screens if they wanted to forget what had happened. I wish I could say that optimism or hope helped me rebuild myself. However, I didn't. I created myself out of resentment, furious. I had a burning need to show that I was more than the timid, afraid girl they had left behind. I signed up for night classes in marketing strategy, digital design, and branding. I studied till dawn while working 11-hour days. I took on jobs that no one wanted, like creating logos for bands that would never make it, awful websites for dubious clients, and social media audits for customers who paid with Starbucks gift cards. After I agreed to everything, things gradually started to alter. I met a woman who is the founder of a sustainable startup through a client's acquaintance. She urgently required a complete branding package. To deliver it, I remained up 3 nights in a row. One of the biggest eco-tech blogs appreciated my work when she first began. More contracts, more clients, and more revenue resulted from that. I opened my own digital consultancy when I was 25. I had 2 part-time workers at the age of 26, and I was highlighted in a design magazine as the unsung hero of up-and-coming companies. I couldn't help but notice the irony, the silent power. All my life, they had referred to me as quiet, and now that quiet had turned into my superpower. I never did, however, contact my parents. They were not unblocked by me. I didn't soften because I always saw Adrian smiling in their kitchen when I considered sending a postcard or a holiday text. I imagined my mother embracing him. I imagined my father calling it forgiveness while shaking his hand. Number. They might have a family of their own. I had a goal, not retaliation, and I was developing something else. And I grinned as I glanced out at the audience as I took the stage for my first speaking engagement, which was a conference with 600 business executives. What it took for me to stand there would never be known to them. However, I did. It was meant to be one of my proudest evenings ever. I, the girl who previously hid in toilet stalls to avoid her brother's taunting, was invited to appear as the keynote speaker at a major design expo. Wearing a navy blazer gave me a sense of importance. My speech was tight, my slides were prepared, and my hair was curled. The lights in the auditorium went down. My name appeared on a huge screen. Then I saw them when I went outside to talk. My parents, dead center, third row. I felt like I might collapse since my stomach fell so much. I honestly thought for a moment that I was having hallucinations. However, no. My dad was there, adjusting his tie. My mother gripped her handbag as if it were a prize. A copy of the event program with my face emblazoned on the front was also in the vacant seat next to them, which I could only presume they had kept. They had unexpectedly and without invitation arrived to watch me. I was blinded by the lights. The audience cheered. All I could do was keep moving forward. I delivered the entire speech. Everything I wrote at 3 a.m. And my eyes watering. Every story about constructing your identity out of rejection's debris. People chuckled. A few people sobbed. However, I never looked into their eyes. A staff member then handed me a tiny envelope while we shook hands and posed for pictures. Some folks said they were family, he clarified, asked me to pass this along. Handwritten on flowered stationery, the note read, "We're so proud of you. Let's put the past behind us. Love, Mom and Dad." No, Adrian, don't apologize. Just a broad, fictitious gesture of peace. I went outside, sat in my heels on the curb, and sobbed more intensely than I had in a long time. They still believed that this story was about them, not because they appeared. I sent an article to a well-known online magazine 4 weeks following the exhibition. I didn't mention names, but the title was "Success is Not Forgiveness." I didn't make fun of them in public. I didn't even bring up the police report or the knife. However, I exposed my journey's reality, the psychological cost of being pushed to recover while those who hurt me applauded from the sidelines, and of being required to forgive those who never accepted responsibility. The article went viral. Thousands of comments were left by strangers and others, telling tales of survivors who created empires out of silence, families that ignored suffering, and parents who stood up for abusers. One comment rang like gospel in my mind. "You don't owe anyone access to the healed version of you they refused to help build." The article was seen by my parents. I know this because a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years sent me a message 3 days later. It read, "Your mom is devastated. She said you've twisted everything." Twisted. I had only spoken the truth. The unvarnished truth, not the edited family photo version they had selected for the holidays. I knew then that I didn't require their apology. I didn't need them to confess, to get down on their knees, or to plead for forgiveness. All I had to do was release the invisible thread that had bound me to their acceptance. And I did. The cousin's message was archived by me. Then, with a glass of wine in hand, I sat on the balcony of my apartment and gazed at the city lights as though they were mine now, because they were, in a sense. I had no desire for vengeance. Freedom was what I want. And this was the sensation at last. I rang the opening bell at NASDAQ 8 months later. Me. Only me. As my firm went public, I stood there in a fitted white suit, flashing on screens all over the nation. The cameras made a sound. Reporters yelled inquiries. On the stage was a bunch of white roses, not from my family but from my team. People who came to me in person. No tears came to my eyes when the confetti fell. I didn't, even though I believed I would. I simply stood there and took in the moment as if it were pure oxygen, free of the odor of guilt. That evening, 3 networks broadcast a news story titled, "Youngest Solo Female Founder to IPO in Her Sector." They mentioned my name as if it were important. They saw it, I knew. They witnessed it, but I'm not sure if they saw it live, saw it replayed, or read about it in one of the business publications my dad used to gather on the kitchen table like sacred books. They were forced to. I picture them swooping in while halting the screen. In a whisper, my mother said, "She looks so grown up." My father remarked, We always knew she'd do big things. Number. They didn't. They were skilled at keeping me quiet. The son who almost destroyed me was protected by them. They were adept at writing letters, showing up without permission, and acting like they were involved in the tale, but they had no idea how to see me. Not at all. Currently, the only version of me that they would ever see again would be on screens, in magazines, and in stories that they were unable to edit. A version that they were unable to reach, alter, or embrace into submission. The door didn't need to be slammed in their faces. All I had to do was construct a stage that they would never be able to enter. And I wasn't afraid when I silenced them. It was liberty.